Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will go ahead and get started in just a couple of minutes. But while we're waiting, we have a quick little poll. We would love to see who's joining us today. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Thank you again so much for joining us for our next webinar in our summer webinar series here for you all. Today's webinar is all about the College Core, kind of an introduction to that. We have some representatives from our academic office, or our academic advising office, as well as some faculty around campus who are going to kind of give you the lowdown on all the things you need to know about the core and what that looks like in your time here at UChicago. Just a couple of reminders for you. This will be recorded and available on our YouTube within the next few days. So if you have to leave early or there's parts of it you want to come back to and listen, you'll always be able to access it that way. And then also we will be doing Q&A at the end of this, after everybody's done presenting. There is a Q&A box at the bottom that you can access and drop your questions throughout. So please feel free to do that the whole time. And yeah, to go ahead and kick things off, I will go ahead and pass it over to Steph in the College Academic Advising Office.
Thank you so much, Lincoln. Welcome. We're so glad you're able to join us today in anticipation of beginning your UChicago journey. Today's presentation aims to provide an introduction to the distinctive liberal arts education that UChicago offers. This is the first of several webinars from the College Academic Advising Office this summer. My name is Steph Mitos. I'm the Assistant Dean and Assistant Director of our College Academic Advising Office, and I'm joined by my department colleague in hosting today's webinar, Kathryn McLravy, our Senior Academic Advisor, who you'll hear from shortly. This presentation will also feature 4 esteemed faculty members with deep connections to the core curriculum. Who will offer a conceptual understanding of the core and their insights of what makes the UChicago core so unique. Jennifer Spruill, Eric Slauter, Scott Snyder, and Abby Reardon. We will first hear about the philosophy of the core and how it serves as a foundation for lifelong learning and intellectual inquiry from Jennifer Spruill, who serves as the social science core sequence co-chair for power, identity, and resistance, among her other roles, followed by a detailed curricular overview of the core components with my colleague Kathryn. And then next, Professor Eric Slauter, Master of the Arts and Humanities Collegiate Division, and Scott Snyder, Master of the Physical Sciences Collegiate Division, will expand upon the habits of mind developed in the Arts and Humanities and Physical Sciences core sequences. And then finally, Abby Reardon, the Executive Director of the Chicago Center for Writing, will highlight the new writing requirement in core and the opportunity it presents to students. During the presentation, I will be moderating the chat function to aggregate and respond to your questions. At the end of the webinar, we have time reserved to respond out loud to your most common questions, and we ask that you keep the questions to the topic of the webinar. If you have other questions you would like to ask our advising office, we ask you to please email collegeadvising@uchicago.edu following the presentation. If time remains at the end, we will invite other questions as time allows, but we invite you again to email our office at any time. Lastly, before getting started, I'd like to share our goals for our time together today. And those are to observe the distinct features of a UChicago liberal arts education, to begin to identify the values and goals inspiring the different course sequences, to recognize the different fields of study among the core requirements, to consider how studying different modes of thought will prepare you to engage critically and creatively, to become familiar with the two options for the core writing requirement. And now I'm really excited to turn it over to my colleague Jennifer Spruill for us to take a dive into the core.
Thanks, Steph. Again, welcome to the University of Chicago and to its unique core curriculum. I imagine some of you are very familiar with the core and may have chosen UChicago because of it. Some of you might be hearing about the core for the first time in this meeting, and many of you are somewhere in between. I'll be talking about the core as a whole, that is, as a common academic program that enables students to explore complex ideas and processes. This is a chart of the different components of the core. You'll see this again and hear about the details from the advisors shortly. Overall, the core might look like distribution requirements you would find at any liberal arts college. It might look like we might want you to take a little art, science, literature, math, social science to get a broad education across disciplines and different areas of study in order to develop broad-based knowledge. However, the core is not a distributional model, and it really aims at other things. This is a photo submitted to our core photo contest this year. And these are, um, anyway, as are all the photos that I'll be showing you. The next photo features two celestial maps in Petrus Appianis's Astronomicum Caesareum at the Adler Planetarium. Samuel submitted it after a field trip there because he thought it served as a visual metaphor for the core. He observes that it's interdisciplinary. It points to both a historical and a lifelong journey of inquiry and learning. It preserves the history of science, which allows students to engage firsthand in the process of discovery. And it signals a democratization of knowledge as it makes science more broadly available. Indeed, the core aims at developing scholarly practices and habits of mind that will serve a lifetime of reflection and learning. Skills like critical thinking, interpretation, argumentation, and oral and written communication are taught as explicit and integral elements of the core's specific pedagogy, not as incidental to discipline-based classes in a distributional model. This next photo shows a core physical sciences class called Waves, Optics, and Heat. The eclipse a few years ago occurred during class time, and the professor thought that experiencing it firsthand would be more valuable than a classroom lesson. Indeed, active inquiry is the core's fundamental orientation. In your college search, you might have heard liberal arts colleges say that they teach how to think, not what to think. This is what we mean at UChicago when we say that. The core is not about teaching the canon. It's not a great books course. It's not about teaching specific content. Instead, the core asks, how do we pose questions from different perspectives? What knowledge and skills are needed to respond to these questions? What methods and reasoning does their analysis call for? How do we respond to these questions in convincing ways using evidence and argument? This becomes evident when we think about the different ways we can study the same object. Of her photo here, Scarlett said, "This is what the core taught me, that reality is never singular. In physical sciences, I learned that what I see on the surface is not the moon itself, but light, photons that left the sun, bounced off a rocky satellite, traveled hundreds of thousands of miles, and then bent again across cold, fresh water. In humanities, I discovered that every culture that ever stood before a moonlit body of water asked the same question: which one is real, the moon or its reflection? Plato asked it in the cave. The core taught me that the most enduring questions are not solved, they're simply illuminated. Jaden said that the core trains us to perceive the world through multiple intersecting disciplines. While walking along the Great Wall, he realized it reflected not only state power and borders, but also human labor and economic relations. Fundamentally, the core begins with the idea that knowledge is produced. It's not objectively sitting in the world for us to discover. So in your core classes, you will locate ideas historically and socially, and you'll explore how we produce knowledge through the questions we ask, the methods and evidence we use to answer them, the fields of knowledge we draw on, and the audiences we address. For example, and we'll need the next slide after that. Thanks. The inquiry biology core fundamentally asks, what is the biological basis of behavior? Classes take place in the lab. This course was taught at the Marine Biological Laboratory on Cape Cod. These classes integrate lectures, discussions, and experiments, and students conduct their own research projects to experience how biologists frame questions and test hypotheses. The social sciences core examines what it means to study society rigorously, as Yaron describes of the photo here, to find organization and logics in the midst of social complexity. One of the questions in the humanities core poses is, how do great texts and art shape us, and how does our understanding shape them? With this photo, Sarah was contemplating the roles of art, literature, and classics in the resilience of Florence throughout its history. The physical sciences core examines physical processes and materials and how we study them. Passing Hein's laboratory after physics class, Ocean realized that the physical sciences core made them more aware of observation itself, how light, season, time, and perspective can change the way we understand our physical world. So you can see that core classes introduce scholarship as an interpretive critical endeavor, which produces new understandings and capacities through active engagement, which opens new perspectives. So what is the value of all of this for you? First, it means you have some really interesting classes to take. The core will also prepare you for your work in your major, but probably not in the way that you might think. The core doesn't provide a disciplinary introduction, and this is with just a couple expressions that your advisors will talk about. But the core develops practices of scholarship through multidisciplinary courses. I interviewed a recent alum working in mergers and acquisitions in a venture capital firm, and he said, because I've been conditioned by the core, I tend to think of problems from a holistic lens. I try to think of problems by seeking my learning from interdisciplinary studies that I took part in. Many core classes are taught by multidisciplinary teaching staffs. For example, in my own sequence, Power, Identity, Resistance, our instructors include anthropologists, historians, sociologists, philosophers, and political scientists. And we meet weekly to talk about our different approaches to the syllabus and our texts, so both we and our students benefit. In the core, we encourage you to explore ideas outside your intended major. The core allows you to explore a range of fields. You might discover interests you weren't aware of and possibly change or add a major or a minor. Core study will deepen and broaden your work in your major. You'll discover how different areas of thought and study are related to each other, often in a single class, like the Chemistry of Artist Materials course. So core classes, and this is really important, core classes are not aimed at particular majors. For example, the social sciences sequence mind is not intended for psych majors. Instead, psych majors might consider, for example, taking an interpretive sequence like Power, Identity, Resistance, or Classics of Social and Political Thought. classes that would let them think about the formation of social and political communities in which individuals live. If you're interested in political theory, you might take a sequence that will expose you to quantitative social analysis. Someone interested in finance who takes energy and world civilizations will find ways that environmental policy relates to their future work. In fact, that same alum said, I work with clients across the spectrum, and I remember learning about a new technology as part of my Physics for Future Presidents course that I was able to use to structure my learning process now. And indeed, the core will help you in your future work. Career advancement will tell you that UChicago students are more competitive on the job market exactly because of the skills they develop in the core. That alum said that what distinguishes his work from other analysts is that when he gets new problems or tasks that he doesn't know how to do, he doesn't get anxious or stressed. He said, I try to think in a very rational way of how I'm going to address this, how I'm going to solve this. He said that the sorts of skills acquired in the core make for the strongest analysts and are impossible to acquire on the job or later in life. So I invite you to really embrace the opportunity that the core presents, explore your interests, gain new experiences, and reach beyond what you think you'll major in.
Great. Thank you so much for that overview on the core. And I love seeing the student photos and hearing their experiences with the core too. So just a reminder, my name is Kathryn McLravy, and I'll be going over more of the details within the core and how students may navigate their path throughout the core curriculum and the breakdown of classes too. So, okay. Overview of the core. The core curriculum consists of 1,500 to 1,600 units, or 15 to 16 courses across 9 fields. And this would also include the language competency as well. Each course is worth 100 units. So it would be totaling about 1,600 units. So some students may have AP or IB credits that could fulfill one of the core requirements. And these credits may impact how core classes and what those core classes you may specifically take on campus. In this chart, you'll see that there is some variation. The variation in math, physical science, and biological sciences reflects which majors you might be preparing for. So in summary, all students will complete from the following: 1 to 2 arts, 2 to 3 humanities, 2 to 3 civilization studies, 1 to 2 writing, which we'll cover more on the writing requirement later in this presentation, 3 social sciences, 1 to 2 math, 2 to 3 physical sciences, 2 to 3 biological sciences, and depending on language, 0 to 3 for that language requirement. When you meet with your academic advisor starting in July, you'll have the chance to discuss how the core may specifically look for you later. So to dive into the requirements, we'll first cover the language competency. And we think that it's imperative for students to demonstrate a beginning level language competency in another language other than English. So students in the college are required to possess understanding of more than one culture and to show competency in another language. Depending on your background, you may or may not be required to take a language at UChicago. If not required, we always encourage students to pursue language and learning proficiency as they represent functional, real-world skills that broaden and deepen all student learning at the university. 3 common ways to complete the requirement include, and I have it on here as well, receiving AP or IB credit, and the scores are on the slide, taking language courses at UChicago, and depending on the placement. So if a student places into Spanish 102, they could take 102 and 103 to then complete that language competency. Or by having gone to school outside the US, if a student was taught in a language other than English abroad. And with all of this, you'll talk with your advisor and see what that path might look like for you too. Moving on to mathematics. The math core requirement is broadly intended to give you space to learn how to formulate, analyze, and solve problems to then evaluate proposed solutions. Problem solving is a skill you'll be asked to use frequently at UChicago, even outside of your math classes too. So it is recommended to take math in your first quarter at UChicago alongside your humanities class. And many, but not all students will fulfill this requirement with calculus, especially if they're pursuing a major that may require this field. So if students do take calculus, they must take the first 2 quarters of the calculus sequence. Placement may also impact this, so this can still be a conversation with your advisor. If you're not considering a major that requires calculus, you may prefer to only take 1 course for the math requirement. These options can include statistics, computer science, data science, or non-calculus math courses. Moving on, we'll be covering the physical science requirement. Whether pursuing a science-related major or not, students will have the opportunity to engage in scientific inquiry process and learn how to make meaning of the physical world. All students are required to take at least 2 physical science classes. If a student is interested in pursuing a major within the physical science division, biological science division, or may wish to explore pre-health options, they will start in an introductory sequence focused on general chemistry or physics. These foundational courses will prepare them to take more advanced major-related classes in future academic years. Importantly, any student who is interested in taking general chemistry or has interest in a major that may require general chemistry must take the placement exam this summer. A placement exam result is required to enroll in any general chemistry course. So non-STEM students are also welcome to take chemistry or physics, but many may opt to take the physical science division course or PHSC classes. This can include topics from astronomy and astrophysics, chemistry, geophysical sciences, molecular engineering, and the geosciences too, and physics. PHSC courses are pre-approved in various pairings, so pay careful attention to which courses are approved to count together so that you can plan accordingly. So biological sciences. The BioCore, sometimes we shorten it to that, aims to provide students with a foundational understanding of the study of life and the structures that support it. It is an area that students may also then plan to take those 2 classes in, and third is optional depending on a student's path within the bio requirement. So similar to physical science requirement in the core, there are different courses available depending on your intended area of study. Your major may impact which bio sequence you would be taking for that core. Students planning to major in biology or related majors like neuroscience, biochem, environmental science, to name a few examples, or even pre-health students in any major may begin their bio coursework in winter quarter of their first year at UChicago. All other students can satisfy the bio general education requirement by taking 2 non-major directed biology courses, a laboratory-based introductory bio course, and then a topics bio focused on the subfield of biology. Next up is our art core requirement. And in this requirement, students are introduced to methods for analyzing, comprehending, and appreciating works of the dramatic, musical, or visual arts. All students will complete 1 art course at the minimum, and some may opt for 2. There are many options to fulfill this requirement, and they're intended to be small classes that are introductory in nature. So no prior background is required or needed for any of the art core classes. There is a specific list that students can choose from in the catalog for what class may constitute an art core. So you can reference the catalog to see that list of art core classes. Moving on to our civilization studies, also known as Civ. There are more than 40 options for Civ originating in departments across campus. Civ provides an in-depth examination of the developmental and accomplishments of some of the world's great civilizations through direct encounters with significant and exemplary documents and monuments, too. Their approach stresses the grounding of events and ideas in historical contexts and the interplay of events, institutions, ideas, and cultural expression in social change. Some sequences are chronological, but almost all of them incorporate material culture as a way of understanding time and place. So you may see this as an example in Asian civilizations with courses that span ancient period to present day, or in gender and sexuality in world civilization, which focuses on the question of formation of gender and sexuality in the social, political, and cultural matrix of different civilizations. Students are required to take at least 2 courses in one sequence topic if they are taking this requirement on campus. Also, about half of our students complete Civ abroad through one of our many study abroad programs, and the other half complete courses on campus. Many find that an ideal time to go on study abroad for civilization studies is during 3rd year. So that could be something students may want to consider down the road. And of course, having those conversations with their advisor too. Moving on to social sciences. The social science sequence, also known as SOC, teaches students a critical vocabulary to ask foundational questions like, what is society and what is the role of an individual in its constitution? This is a requirement students will take in their 2nd year in the college. And there are many interesting and thought-provoking sequences to choose from. Some sequences focus on classic texts like John Locke or Karl Marx, while others may focus on fields of inquiry and research methodologies, including statistical analysis or even research experiments too. All sequences explore how the social sciences formulate questions and inquire into the nature of social life. So in terms of just other examples, there is the power, identity, and resistance sequence. There is self, culture, and society, mind, and many others to choose from too. And then our final core requirement I'll be reviewing today is our humanities requirement. This is taken in a student's 1st year at UChicago. The objectives of the humanities course are to provide a bridge between high school and college and promote independent and critical thought and introduce students to UChicago's discussion-driven learning environment. It'll also help students with how to engage in text, how to read closely with text, and how to begin develop capacity for interpretive complexity. Students will take 2 quarters of humanities and may consider a 3rd quarter, especially if they are planning on a pre-health track. So humanities courses are a way thinking about engaging with a variety of texts, whether it's historical or philosophical. They are not a survey of courses. Rather, they work to establish methods for appreciating and analyzing the power of text. So moving next, we have Professor Eric Slauter here, who is the Master of the Arts and Humanities Collegiate Division and Deputy Dean of Arts and Humanities, and I will be passing this over to him.
Okay, thanks so much, Kathryn. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to talk with all of the incoming students, and especially to be able to welcome them in the fall. Each of you will be starting your college experience here at the university with a course in common. You'll all be enrolling in the Humanities core. Starting this fall, with the exception of some transfer students who have the chance to do this over the summer, you'll each be located in a small group, encountering some great minds from around the world, by which I mean your classmates, and confronting together some of the great ideas and great works of human civilization. The Humanities is where you begin your UChicago journey. These small courses are your passport to the world's ideas, arts, languages, and cultures. These are not just any courses, as Kathryn has just told you. They're truly foundational. This is the place where you'll begin to develop those habits of mind that will carry you through your studies here and will carry you through your lives when you leave us. And habits of mind is what I'm here to talk with you about. But first, I want you to know a little more about the arts and humanities here. Your general education in arts, in the arts core and the humanities core and the languages can be an exciting space. They should be a transformative space, a place to pursue your passions and your interests, a life-changing space, and one that can lead to exciting careers or can help you distinguish yourself in ways that make you more flexible and nimble and unique no matter what field or career path you choose. We treat the arts here as a mode of thinking and engaging the world. And in your humanities core courses, you'll learn about the analysis and practice of the arts, the study of civilizations, languages, histories, and cultures, the disciplines of philosophy, linguistics, and religious studies, and so much more. These can be fun courses, and they should be, but we take them very seriously here, helping you cultivate your creative intelligence, develop your global fluency, and giving you access to the cultures of the world is our business. And I'm very happy to report to you today that business is booming here. While every student will take a humanities core course and pursue the study or practice of the arts core, one of the key distinguishing features about the campus that you're about to join is that the humanities and arts are thriving here, even beyond the core, which is just not true everywhere else. So here's a chart, the first chart, that shows you how many students decide to pursue a degree in the arts and humanities here. 20% of all students in the college have chosen a major in the arts and humanities. That means 20% of each class. Even more impressive, 30% of all of our students in the college choose a degree in the arts and humanities, either a major or minor. 30% share is something that all of my peers at other institutions really are jealous of. So could we see the next slide, please? And as I said, we're outperforming our peers here. So just to take the 2025 graduates, for instance, from the top 8 schools in the U.S. News and World Report's rankings last year. Now, this chart factors in all the comparable programs in the arts and humanities at our peer institutions. But there are different ways of slicing the arts and humanities. So here at Chicago, departments that are in the arts and humanities elsewhere, like history, the history department, or anthropology, are located in our social sciences. So you won't see those on this chart. And here at UChicago, the major in cognitive science, which includes required coursework in all divisions. So you take philosophy and linguistics in the arts and humanities, psychology in the social sciences, computer science in the physical sciences, and neuroscience in the biological sciences. That major is housed in the arts and humanities. It's a growing program here, and in 2025, we graduated 39 students. 39 of those 493 students were cognitive scientists. Yale that year graduated 70. So if we were to remove cognitive science from this graph, we'd have about 450 arts and humanities students, and Yale would simply have 330 in comparable programs. So why are the arts and humanities doing so well comparatively here? Could I have the next slide, Kathryn? To be sure, we have some of the world's top-ranked departments and some of the most transformative faculty who study the philosophy of artificial intelligence or the culture of climate change. We are home to acclaimed artists in a range of media and some of the most cited scholars in the disciplines of philosophy, linguistics, literary studies, and cultural history and archaeology. All of these faculty teach in the general education programs, whether in the arts core or the humanities core or civilization studies or in our language programs. Next slide, please. You can major in 26 different fields, including brand new majors in archaeology and cognitive science, as I've just said. Or, next slide, you can pursue minors in 30 different distinct areas, including brand new programs in architectural studies, American Sign Language and Deaf Studies, archaeology, computational linguistics, Creole studies, public thinking, and science communication. Next slide, please. And you can study languages that you can't study anywhere else. We offered over 50 last year, from Akkadian to Yiddish and everything in between, including languages that our faculties regularly use in their research, and languages that will position you for careers in any field around the world. If you come to us with competency in one language, I encourage you to explore other options when you're here. Next slide, please. We find that students here, more than elsewhere, are combining their studies in one division with coursework in another, leading to great successes both in the marketplace and in the competition for prestigious national fellowships like the Gates Cambridge Scholars, the Marshall Scholars, and the Rhodes Scholars. All of these students in the last 3 years have had one major inside of the arts and humanities. Next slide, please. But to be fair, all of these schools on the US News and World Report list employ amazing humanities and arts faculties. They have strong departments too. So why did we graduate 74 students with a major in philosophy last year when Princeton graduated 21, Harvard graduated 29, and Yale graduated 28? Yes, we graduated nearly as many students in the discipline of philosophy in 2025 as Princeton, Harvard, and Yale combined. How did we do this? What makes this place so different? The core plays a huge role. It's one of the things that draws you here, right? We see more students telling admissions that they're interested in arts and humanities than our peers. Last year, we graduated a total of 93 students with a degree in philosophy. That includes both majors and minors. That's an astonishingly high number. But 195 students on the way in last year said that philosophy was one of the 3 things they were interested in studying. That's what they told admissions. And in 2026, 205 of you told admissions that you're interested in philosophy. 205 is an extraordinarily high intake number. That's nearly 10% of the class. So perhaps in a few years, we will have even more philosophy majors than we have now. I hope, in fact, that that's the case. So many of you have come here for the core. What should you expect? The first thing to say is that the core changes. It has changed over time. In fact, it changes year over year. But our mission in education hasn't changed. It's simply the way in which we deliver that mission. Once, we used to put everyone in a single lecture hall, a hall that you will come to know called Mandel Hall, and we would parade a series of experts to lecture to them. You would get one faculty expert on Plato, a different faculty expert on Homer, still another faculty expert on the Roman Empire, Syria, and you get the idea. Then, next slide. We'd put them all into a gymnasium and give everyone a comprehensive test at the end. Now, this is a great way to deliver information, lecturing, and it's a great way to assess if that information was delivered. Many schools use lectures and tests like this for the arts and humanities. But an education here is not about receiving information. Next slide, please. Over time, we evolved a different delivery style and a different theory of how we wanted to approach the core. The person at the head of the class would still be an expert, but with 5,000 years of recorded human history, they couldn't be an expert in everything. The job description for that person at the front of the room changed. They were not there to tell you what to think, to relay information, but to help you develop how to think on your own. Next slide. Second, the core is not unitary. It once was, and there are core programs around the country, such as at Columbia, where everyone is reading the same text at the same time. That doesn't happen here. Since the 1960s, and especially since the 1970s, we have embraced variants in the core and then separate sequences like the ones that you will have a chance to take. Students will read all sorts of different texts in the humanities core. Here, for example, is just a snapshot of what students are reading in the middle of winter in the humanities core. That is to say, at the very center of the humanities core. You can see some students are reading a 20th century author with a 4th century BCE author. Others are reading Aristotle and Augustine, Homer and Harriet Jacobs, Descartes, Shakespeare, The Pillow Book, Richard Rodriguez's Hunger of Memory. These are all great books in a way. But why do we do it this way? Because, and here's another secret, we don't think these courses are about the text that is at the center of the discussion. Instead, it's about the habits of mind that students develop through close reading, through writing, through conversations with their peers. I find that if I've lectured in a core course, that is a failure. It's my failure. There's a place, obviously, for my expertise. That's why you come to the university. And if you want to hear what I think, then you can take a course with me outside of the core. But in the core, we want students to learn to ask a question or reconstruct an argument the way a philosopher would, to hear a line of poetry or read a narrative the way a creative writer or a literary scholar might, to see a painting like an art historian or a film like a cinema scholar, to put something into context the way a historian does. These are the disciplinary habits of mind that are most important in conveying in the general education. Next slide, please. We are making more of the campus into a classroom. And so when you come and take the core, you're not just going to have a course in Cobb Hall. Your humanities class might visit the Smart Museum, for instance, as many classes do. Next slide. Or the Tony Award-winning Court Theater on campus. Or the special collections at Regenstein. Final slide. When my students in Human Being and Citizen read the Epic of Gilgamesh, for instance, they go over to the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures and see 3,500-year-old clay tablets with the text of the poem inscribed on them. At Special Collections, they see 2,000-year-old papyri fragments of the Iliad. They see some of the earliest printed rabbinic Bibles when we read Genesis. The first printing of Sophocles' Antigone. Imagine that, the very first printing of Sophocles' Antigone. A famous edition of Plato that entered our library before any students arrived here on campus. And a printing of Martin Luther King's famous letter from a Birmingham jail that circulated in a civil rights magazine in 1963. This is a magical place to first encounter these great works and to begin to develop those habits of mind, which both with your new classmates and with the faculty. I hope you have a great summer. I'm excited to welcome you in the fall.
Thanks so much, Eric, for everything you just said. My name is Scott Snyder. I'm professor of chemistry, and I'm the collegiate master for the Physical Sciences Division and also deputy dean of the Physical Sciences Division. And if you don't see me necessarily in the fall, if you're taking organic chemistry, that's the place where many of you might ultimately take a class with me. Other places you might find me is I'm a resident dean in the campus north and specifically in Thangaraj House. And so I certainly have a chance to interact with some of you there. But for today, what I really want to do in terms of welcoming all of the members of the class of 2030 is to talk a little bit more just about what the Physical Sciences Collegiate Division is and how that then relates to the core requirements that we've already been talking about. So on the next slide, what we are is a collection of 7 different physical departments, along with the Pritzker School for Molecular Engineering. And so that is what will organize, potentially for those of you who are majors and minors, the types of study that you might necessarily want to pursue. In addition to that kind of more formal or traditional structure, our division has a number of institutes and centers, and this is also true across campus. And although there's a lot of different names here, I think what's really the important concept is what each one of these does is brings together faculty from disparate units or different fields of study together to think both about collaborative research. Sometimes these will bring in people from the community or from other academic institutions, broadening the field of study, not just nationally, but also internationally. And in addition, brings a lot of opportunities to bring external experts to campus, both to enrich just your overall experience, as well as maybe to open you up to some new problems in general. But over the years, over the course of the past century, the Physical Sciences Collegiate Division has had tremendous impact on the world around us. And so if we go to the next slide, just as one measure of that are major scientific prizes and awards. So not only the Nobel Prize, and here we're just listing recipients from faculty and students in the areas of chemistry, physics, and physiology or medicine, but then also the Fields Medal for mathematics. And just for some of you maybe who aren't as familiar with the Fields Medal, that's the Nobel Prize for mathematics, but the difference is that's given only once every 4 years, where the Nobel Prizes are given annually. And I'll just mention in terms of some of our student recipients, John Jumper and Munji Bawendi, for example, are both students who won this in chemistry most recently in 2024 and 2023, respectively. And hopefully you see just at the top a number of things that I'm sure you have seen in some of your high school chemistry, physics, or other courses. So for example, the famous Urey-Miller experiment, which was able to abiotically make amino acids from simple chemicals using heat and electricity, to radiocarbon dating, that came up here from G. Gordon Libby, to the discovery of black holes, to the famous Millikan oil drop experiment. So over the decades, UChicago chemistry has had a deep impact on science and continues to have a deep impact on science. And while many of the student recipients here that are starred as part of this list are in fact our graduate students, without question, undergraduates have had an incredibly deep impact and continue to do so. So on our next slide, what I've highlighted here are just 3 selected examples of some recent papers. These are all in the field of chemistry, in which either the sole author or the leading author is an undergraduate researcher. And this is just a few of numerous examples. Many of our students, whether they become our majors or even honor students or not, do have the opportunity to contribute to forefront science and ultimately typically to have co-authorship of papers because of their seminal contributions to elements of forefront research. And maybe just as one reflection of that, our undergraduates do receive top honors. And so here just are a number of different awards that our students have received over the course of the past decade. This includes some awards that traditionally I would say do not go to science-based students, such as Marshall and Rhodes Fellowships, but because we have students who are so strong in so many areas, that certainly can occur. But here I want to maybe denote in particular what are called the Goldwater Scholarships. So this is an award in which certain universities and colleges are allowed to nominate 4 students each year. Here, because we have so many amazing undergraduates in science, just to be nominated as one of those 4 to represent UChicago is a major honor. But over the last 5 years, 90% of our nominees have gone on to win, and that really is a percentage of success that is the envy of any other university in the United States. Right. So what is critical, though, in order to get into this, and research, I would say, just for you all broadly, is something that many undergraduates who are interested in doing actually can do during their first year, or in particular might contemplate doing at the end of their first year in the summer before their sophomore year. And there is tremendous financial support, both departmentally and through the college, to provide monies both to do research here or as well as other places throughout the world. But in order to get into that, so from a core requirement perspective, for those of you who are going to be future science majors or minors, fulfilling the Phi-Sci core is going to be very simple because you're going to have to take mathematics or scientific courses, obviously, in order to fulfill those requirements. All right, what I think, though, is really important to emphasize is for those of you contemplating these pathways, it is essential for you to begin your coursework in your first year in the fall. And so, for example, our math, chemistry, and physics introductory courses are not single classes. They are sequences, A, B, and C level courses for the fall, the winter, and the spring. And here, if you do not get on the train or the plane in the fall, you will not be able to do so again until the following fall. So we don't have staggered ways in which we enter these courses. So the fall is where this is critical. Now, it's already been mentioned about our existence of both a math and a chemistry placement test. The chemistry placement test is specific, again, to chemistry. The math placement test is used both to decide where you should take your mathematics beginning as well as your physics beginning. And although I hope that this goes without saying, it is incredibly important that you take both of those exams faithfully. We want you all to succeed. We want to challenge you all in your courses. We do not want you to run a marathon if you've never run a 5K race. And so why I'm saying that is that we have 3 different levels of chemistry sequences, multiple levels of math sequences, and 3 different levels of physics sequences. And we really want to be able to know what you do and do not know in order both to meet you where you are, but then to place you in the right way to challenge you for the growth that you're going to need going forward. And I think something that for some students is a transition, because typically I don't think you've often taken classes maybe with north of 100 students. Many of our introductory courses are in a larger format. Most of our courses later are not. But as part of that transition to a larger format, we do try to bring a small class experience by breaking down courses into smaller recitation sections, typically of 15 to 20 students. We try to keep you together as a group throughout the course of the year, along with the same graduate student teaching assistant. And we have innumerable areas of additional support in the form of former undergraduates who have taken the class to provide some additional learning, as well as some collaborative learning, which is peer-led undergraduate instruction as means of support. So I just want to say, for those of you, when you do take these larger courses, do not try to do this necessarily alone. I think the community element, both of studying and working with others, is really both integral to getting to know your peers, but also I think having success in all these different types of courses. All right, so I'll finish though now by talking about what the Phi-Sci core looks like, or our physical science core, for those of you who are non-majors. All right, and so here, what is our goal? All right, so given that many of you are going to be voting members of democratic societies, we really want to provide all of our students with the ability to understand, as well as to assess our knowledge of the physical world. And so our goal is to teach the principles of experimentation, observation, and scientific inquiry, and that's often through the aegis of the rich tradition of scientific discovery at the University of Chicago, as I've just kind of talked about. And so I think just to maybe encapsulate this comment, I want to borrow a quote from the late University of Chicago professor and Nobel laureate Subrahmanyan Chandrasekhar, whose key contribution was predicting the existence of black holes based on theoretical contributions, who said in the following about science in our lives that for him, science is a perception of the world around us. Science is a place where what you find in nature pleases you. And so through our physical sciences core courses, we really are aiming to illustrate to all of you how scientists explore the world from various vantage points, whether that is experimentally in the laboratory, whether that's in the field through observation, or perhaps using computers in a more theoretical framework, really seeking to illustrate how data drives hypotheses and further experiments, to how scientific questions are formulated in the first place, and to how scientists even select what problems or challenges to address. And so our goal is really to ultimately engender your ability to both understand and assess our knowledge of the physical world, and hopefully those skills will translate productively to many of your other pursuits, whether here or also later in life. All right, so what is unique about our Phi-Sci core, separate from our offerings, is that this is not a menu where you can select anything you want. So you see here 5 different areas of study, and what this requires is specific pairings of courses within those 5 areas. So for example, maybe you are excited about taking global warming. That's one of our geophysical sciences courses. Another offering is the physics for future presidents. That comes from physics. That is not an approved pairing. So approved pairings will be 2 courses in any one of those 5 areas. So I want you to be aware of that, because there is not universal flexibility. And our courses are designed this way because they're meant to mirror or work with each other to really provide you a sense of depth and understanding in a particular field, where courses have been designed to reflect each other and to build on one another. So next. And so what I want to make clear in addition is that from time to time, we will have different courses offered in a different year. So when you contemplate taking your Phi-Sci core, these courses could change overall from time to time. And of course, because science updates, our classes can also update. So for instance, some of our courses have maybe broader titles, like the chemistry of big problems. So for example, maybe if that was instructed by a person who's interested in material science, maybe an organizational question could be to think about painting the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge. Why are we painting that consistently? Well, that's because 100-year paint doesn't exist. That's a big problem. So how do we think about that? Or alternatively, antibiotics, how do they get developed? We have resistance. How might we combat that? So different focuses based upon who it is that might necessarily teach that particular class. And in addition, we are often very, very excited to add additional courses. And so next, just as a few examples, so next year, we will be introducing for the first time in the spring a class that is called Geo-Sci-Fi. And so this is Earth science through the lens of science fiction. So this is a class that will be offered under the geophysical sciences set of pairings. So for example, if you've seen the movie Jurassic Park, right? What would be the science behind truly being able to, say, extract DNA from an organism that has been petrified? Is that even possible? Could that truly be amplified? Things like that. Or if you've ever seen the movie The Core, where Aaron Eckhart plays the role of a UChicago professor, very reasonably so. How, for instance, is the science behind this device that somehow goes all the way down to the core? Again, is that even feasible? What would necessarily be required? So those would be some questions that I know that class is excited to address. Down below are two of our more newer introductions from our molecular engineering set of principles. And again, we have lots of different classes overall. All right, so I hope for those of you who will be engaged with us, either through a non-major track or a major track, you'll see that there are just lots of offerings that we have. And again, as part of this, Jennifer showed some really, I think, amazing pictures of how our students go out into the field and the community as part of these courses. This is just one example I wanted to bring to your attention, which had a recent story in our college news. So in our basement of our geophysical sciences building, we in fact have a homemade and the world's largest wave tank at 40 feet overall. So this is both a research tool as well as something that is used as part of one of our physical sciences courses, unique to UChicago in its entirety. So just one example, I think, of the exciting things that we have. All right, so that's what I wanted to share with you. Again, welcome to all of you. Happy to address any questions. And now I'd like to pass it on to my colleague, Abby Reardon, who will talk to you about writing in the core.
Thank you so much, Scott. And hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and to welcome you to the University of Chicago. As Scott noted, I'm Abby Reardon. I'm the Executive Director of the Chicago Center for Writing and an Associate Dean and Senior Instructional Professor in the college. And I'm very excited to welcome you to the university and to introduce you to the core writing requirement. So what it is, how it works, and what you can expect in your first year. At the University of Chicago, writing isn't just about communicating what you already know. It's a way of thinking, asking questions, developing ideas, and entering into conversations with others. It's also an activity that we share in common across all disciplines and domains, and a fundamental feature of many of our classes and degree programs across the humanities, the physical sciences, as you were hearing from Professor Slauter and Snyder. Across the core, you'll use writing to engage complex problems, test your assumptions, interpret texts and evidence, and participate in the intellectual life of the university. So the core writing requirement is designed to support that work from the very beginning of your time here. For the remainder of the time that I have with you, I'm really looking forward to discussing with you kind of why do we have a core writing requirement in the first place, and also what are the options available to fulfill the core writing requirement next year specifically. So for the class of 2030, there are two ways to complete the core writing requirement. And Kathryn, could we go to the next slide, please? Great. So many students, and in fact, most students, will complete the core writing requirement through a multidisciplinary class called Inquiry, Conversation, Argument, or ICA is what we call it for short. So ICA is a one-quarter credit-bearing seminar focused explicitly on the practices of inquiry, conversation, and argument across disciplines. As you'll see both on this slide and in the college catalog, we refer to the ICA version of the core writing requirement as the maroon track. So ICA is a small discussion-based seminar organized around a central open-ended question. So each section explores that question from multiple perspectives, drawing on a range of texts, disciplines, and materials. And as I'm sure you already know and will discover even more intensely once you arrive on campus, asking meaningful questions and exploring potential answers will be so fundamental to the work that you do in the core and in the college. And so we're very happy that the writing core requirement emphasizes inquiry right from the jump. So some of the questions that have motivated recent sections of inquiry, conversation, argument, and you can think of these in a way as the topics or titles of individual sections of the class, include what is privacy in an age of surveillance? What do businesses owe society? Why tell stories of war? Are we more than our habits? Why should we read? And maybe most fundamentally, what is a good question? So these are all sections of ICA that we've run in the past year. We have an even broader range of sections that we'll be offering next year, including new questions. Questions like what goes right when everything goes wrong, which will focus not only on the sciences, but kind of experimentation in general. We'll be running a section with the question, what can a miracle mean? Thinking about the notion of the miracle from a variety of different perspectives. We'll be running a section called What's Your Process? Attending to how processes work in the creation of knowledge and the creation of things of all kinds. So as you can probably tell from this range of questions, there's a wide variety of approaches to inquiry, conversation, argument. And these classes are designed by instructors who have disciplinary expertise in these questions. They'll invite you as well to explore kind of texts and topics related to these questions from a variety of disciplinary perspectives. So again, ICA, the maroon track version of the writing core requirement, it's structured around 3 core practices: inquiry, asking meaningful, open-ended questions; conversation, engaging with texts, ideas, and other writers; and argument, so developing your own perspectives grounded in analysis and interpretation of evidence of all kinds. So while these are the words that make up the course title, they're not just course topics. They're habits of mind you'll practice throughout your work in the core and beyond. And you'll notice that I've started with a discussion of inquiry, conversation, argument, or the maroon track, because most students will be completing the maroon track for their core writing requirement. The college is in the process of phasing in ICA as the universal writing core requirement over the next several years. And so eventually all students in the college will take ICA for their core writing requirement. This year, though, there is an alternative to ICA. Kathryn, can we go to the next slide, please? Great. So some students, depending on their humanities core sequences, and I'll say a bit more about that in a moment, will instead complete the writing core requirement through humanities writing seminars. These are 2-quarter pass-fail seminars taken alongside selected humanities core sequences. And as my colleagues have alluded to throughout this conversation, within each core, there are different ways that you can satisfy that requirement. So as Professor Slauter had indicated, in the humanities core, you might take human being and citizen, or poetry and the human, or readings in world literature, or philosophical perspectives. There are 8 sequences in the humanities currently. And so 3 sequences have students complete humanities core writing seminars instead of ICA. And you'll have plenty of time to talk with your academic advisors going forward about your preference and approach. But for now, I'm just happy to share that the 3 humanities core sequences where students would complete the gray track as their writing core requirement for next year are poetry and the human, readings in world literature, and language and the human. So those 3 sequences, if you're enrolled in those core sequences, you would not take ICA. You would take the humanities writing seminars. So a bit more about the humanities writing seminars. These are designed to help students develop as college writers in close connection with the texts, questions, and intellectual practices of their humanities courses. So this means the writing work you do in these seminars will be closely connected to the materials you're encountering in your humanities core sequence. So you'll practice the kinds of writing that are central to humanistic inquiry: close reading, careful interpretation, analytical argument, and revision. So you'll work on how to move from observation to claim, how to develop an argument from textual evidence, and how to revise your writing in response to feedback. So because these seminars, unlike ICA, are pass-fail and they extend across 2 quarters, so autumn and winter of your first year, they're designed to give you sustained practice in college-level writing without making writing feel like a one-time hurdle. So the goal isn't simply to produce polished papers, though you will work toward that. The goal for the humanities writing seminars, as is the case for ICA, is to help you understand writing as a process, a way of discovering what you think, clarifying what's at stake, and joining a conversation about texts and ideas. Kathryn, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So as I'd mentioned, you'll have the chance to talk with your academic advisor this summer about which pathway applies to you and which would be most compelling to you. So both ICA and the humanities writing seminars satisfy the core writing requirement. And both are designed to support your development as a reader, writer, and thinker at UChicago. So although ICA and the humanities writing seminars are organized differently, they share a common purpose: helping you become a more confident, reflective, and capable college writer. And as I'm sure many of you are thinking, these skills are all the more important and all the more complicated in an era of generative AI. What does it mean to write in the proliferation of generative AI? That's something you'll be thinking about in these classes and seminars as well. So in both pathways, you'll learn that writing is a process. You'll draft, you'll receive feedback, you'll revise your work extensively and ongoingly. You'll participate in workshops and discussions, you'll learn to see writing not just as a final product, but as a way of discovering and refining your ideas. So, in other words, you'll get to experience writing as both a mode of thought and a means of expression, and often in both contexts as a collaborative intellectual activity. So I'll just say a little bit more about what you'll do in each of these different core requirements. So in ICA, you'll complete a sequence of projects that build on one another. You'll begin with a close analysis of a single text. You'll develop a longer essay that contributes to an ongoing intellectual conversation. And you'll design a prospectus, exploring a question you want to pursue more deeply during your time in the college. Each project in ICA involves drafting, feedback, substantial revision, and you'll be receiving feedback not only from your professor, but from your peers and colleagues in the class as well. You'll learn to be a critical reader of others' writing and become one of your own writing as well. So if you complete the humanities writing seminars, your assignments will be shaped by the specific humanities sequence you're taking to reinforce what I'd mentioned previously. But the underlying goals are closely related. In both contexts, you learn to read closely, develop analytical claims, work with evidence, revise your writing over time, and develop your own voice as a writer and thinker. And just to wrap up then, across both pathways, you'll develop shared key skills. So the close reading, as I've mentioned, working with evidence and sources, building clear and nuanced arguments, revising your ideas in prose, reflecting on your writing process. What works well for one writer may not work well for another. And so this core requirement will give you the chance to experiment with different approaches and determine what's most effective for you. Just as importantly, you'll practice taking intellectual risks. So you'll ask questions, explore uncertainty, and work through ideas with others. And just to say a bit more about how the core writing requirement fits within the broader Chicago Center for Writing. So it is, in fact, just one part of the college's effort to support writing across your college experience. And so the Chicago Center for Writing, which houses the core writing requirement, includes writing in the core, writing in your major, so upper level classes focused on disciplinarily specific and public facing writing, additional opportunities for public and professional writing, and access to workshops, tutoring, and other resources that are explicitly focused on writing. So whether you complete the requirement through ICA or through the humanities writing seminars, this first year writing experience is only the beginning of what you'll do with writing in your time at the university. So to close, no matter your background or prior experience, the writing requirement is designed to meet you where you are and to help you grow. So it's an opportunity to not just become a stronger writer, but to become a more thoughtful reader, a more curious thinker, and a more active participant in the intellectual life of the university. So I know I'm very excited to work with you. I know my colleagues teaching in the ICA course and writing seminars are very excited to work with you. And we look forward to seeing what you discover through your writing. Thank you.
All right, sorry about that. Just looking for the unmute button. So in terms of next steps, you now all have an invitation to Canvas, which is where we will post more information on some of the ways to prepare for your first advising appointment, as well as supplemental information with the core curriculum as well. In this screenshot right here, we do have some information on the humanities sequences and videos that we have created to give you a glimpse into the specific readings and faculty who do lead these sessions. So you have that invitation in your UChicago email. So if you haven't yet, please make sure to accept that, and you can begin reviewing and preparing for your summer meeting. All right, and now we can open it up for questions. Steph, I understand you've been fielding some questions in the chat as well. So if there's any questions, you can go from there.
Sure, that's right, Kathryn. I have some questions here. And then again, wanted to encourage anyone with more comprehensive concerns, please feel free to email our office. We're happy to respond to you. And then I think if we wanted to put up the next slide just to make students aware of some of the opportunities upcoming if you're not able to stick around for our Q&A episode here. Just some highlights we want to emphasize for upcoming dates over the remaining months. So thank you for that, Kathryn. So first, I've responded to some questions, but they brought up some other interesting themes for us to think about. This is one that we commonly hear from students. This is often the first time they've encountered the concept of a sequence in their academic experience. And specifically, it was a incoming student asking about the humanities and civilization sequences and why someone would need to maybe remain within the same sequence of study for those requirements. So I'm going to pose this to our faculty members in terms of how you conceive of sequences and what the foundational building blocks are for you in developing these and having students continue within a same consecutive sequence.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one, Steph. I mean, as I mentioned, we've delivered the core differently over time, and in the early 1970s, we developed the idea of sequences. So from the 30s through the 60s, we had a single humanities core called An Introduction to the Arts, where you learned how to listen to music, how to look at paintings, and how to read texts. And in the 1960s and the 70s, when we reorganized the college, we decided to give students a little bit more choice and to give faculty a little bit more choice about what to teach, and we developed the idea of the sequence. And it was still very important for us that students remain together as a group, and when possible, that they remain with a common instructor over the year. That's not always possible, and that they begin to develop conversations in a particular area. So we still do think, that some of these sequences, like human being and citizen or philosophical perspectives, they build chronologically over the course of the year. So human being and citizen last year began with the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I believe ended with James Baldwin and Toni Morrison. So really a millennia sweep. I know that philosophical perspectives begins in the ancient world. The winter is dedicated to the age of the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, and the third quarter is devoted to more recent philosophy, sort of modern philosophy. So it's important for us that students get a kind of grounding in the same sequence, but also, that they remain in their sections quarter over quarter so that they begin to really develop this academic community with those same students over time. And with civilization studies, I think there are options to do 2 of 3. In some cases, some of our civilization studies sequences are again, they are mostly chronological. Some of them are topical, but it's just important that to us that students are getting both a kind of breadth and a depth. And so I think, doing one quarter of East Asian Civ and then another quarter of Latin American Civ is really not the thing that we want our students to be doing. It's fine, if space permitting, to add an extra section of civilization studies, and students now have the opportunity to do civilization studies abroad and to do these things on site, to do Latin American civilizations and Oaxaca or Western European in Barcelona or Middle Eastern in Cairo. And those are really wonderful experiences where you are with the same students and thinking about the same kind of sweep of history. But I think, even with all of these choices, there are certain constraints that we just feel are important. And, staying in a sequence or staying in a Civ sequence or a Hume sequence is one of those things.
Thank you, Eric. Another great question here. When do students typically complete the core requirements? So our general answer is we want as much of core to be completed in the first 2 years as possible. It's very commonplace, particularly for students going abroad, for their civilization requirements, to do that during third year. But there is also a lot of fluctuation depend on your intended areas of study that might present a different path that might work better for you and what your trajectory is looking like in terms of majors and minors. Curious also to hear from our core masters, or sorry, master of our collegiate divisions about the core courses which you have purview over, how you see students kind of navigating those in their first few years of study.
Well, as we've said, the Humanities Core is a course that all of our first year students are going to take. Transfer students are also required to take the Humanities Core either in this new opportunity over the summer in a compressed way or just during the academic year. The Arts Core, I think uh, students sometimes believe that their registration eligibility matures over time, but in the case of the Arts Core, it's better to try to do it in the first 2 years, really, so that you can, if you find something that you're really excited about, you have the opportunity still to take more courses. So you may think the only course that you want to take is the media arts and design practice course where you're going to be developing video games. But if you wait until your third quarter of your fourth year to do that, then I think there's a huge opportunity cost for you. So I encourage students to take advantage of some of the bridges that we've built between the Humanities Core and the Arts Core. So students in Poetry and the Human, for instance, can do 2 quarters in the Humanities Core and then transition to a creative writing course in the third quarter that satisfies the Arts Core. That's true also of media aesthetics, where you can take that media arts and design practice course in the third quarter of your first year after you've taken 2 quarters of media aesthetics. And that can be a great way to kind of continue conversations that you had over the year and have them culminate. I encourage students, whether they're going abroad or not, to not put the civilization studies off for too long. Again, because students often find enormous excitement. They take gender and sexuality and world civilization and just discover a whole new world, or they take energy and world civilizations, or any one of the area studies versions of that, and they just discover new things that about this university, and then feel like they've missed out on things by not doing them early enough.
Yeah, from the phi-sci or physical sciences and also the biological sciences perspective, again, we encourage you to finish the core sequence by your second year, but I will say it's not atypical for students often to do that in their third or their fourth year. I will say, though, that if you delay taking those courses, where there can potentially be challenges making sure that it does successfully fit within your schedule vis-a-vis other things you may want to accomplish. But we're not going to waive a core requirement in hopes that you might complete a second major, for example. So I think it's just important to kind of think about your schedule and what it is you'd like to achieve, recognizing that there are lots and lots of opportunities to fulfill some of those things. So for example, our astronomy and astrophysics department has Phi-Sci core classes for non-majors at the Paris Center, for instance. It could be completed then. It also can be completed oftentimes under a number of different summer courses if that is something that is open and available to you. So I do think it is just thinking again thoughtfully about your schedule vis-a-vis other things that you'd like to accomplish.
And to follow up for you, Scott, we had a student pose a question regarding the chemistry placement test. So for a student who is a non-intended STEM major, what's your encouragement in terms of taking the chemistry placement exam?
I think it depends upon what path you want to pursue. So maybe this wasn't as clearly articulated as it could be. If you took general chemistry as a quote non-science major, that fulfills the physical sciences core requirement. So sometimes our students elect to do it by, let's say, a more traditional sequence of a standard science course versus, say, some of our physical science offerings, which are designed explicitly for anyone who is a non-science major. So I think if you think that it's conceivable that you might want to take physics, chemistry, those types of sequences, you don't lose anything by taking the placement exam, and it would provide clarity in terms of what it is you might want to do. And certainly, I think in some of those respects, particularly, let's say, the math placement exam, that also helps you because some of our Phi-Sci courses might require calculus, some do not. And so, again, that would help you to understand if you have the mathematical background you need to take that particular course.
Thanks so much, Scott. Abby, we have a few questions about the writing requirement. So we're in this kind of transitional year where there are two routes, the gray and maroon track options. A student was asking about a distinction of why in the gray track, that year, the 0 unit would not be considered an additional course. So maybe you could speak to what the particularities are about ICA and the writing seminar and their integration with humanities.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. So, to start with ICA, which is easier to start with in some ways because it operates like a normal course, because it is a normal course. Students in that class meet twice weekly for an hour and a half, as you would for many other classes, and receive a letter grade by the end of the quarter. So it is just a standalone class in that way. The humanities writing seminars are not a class. So they do not meet weekly. And in fact, you do not need to enroll in the humanities writing seminars. The registrar will enroll students who are taking one of the 3 humanities sequences that will be on the grade track. And so just to repeat, and this will be information that's available on Canvas and with your advisor, the grade track sequences next year will be readings in world literature, poetry in the human, and language in the human. So students who are enrolled in one of those 3 Hume sequences, after the quarter begins, the registrar's office will automatically place students into HUMA 19100. That's our designation for the writing seminars. And as I noted, these don't meet weekly. So students will be grouped into smaller groups within your class, and 2 or 3 times per quarter, you will meet with a writing specialist, so a teaching assistant type figure that is attached to your humanities course to focus on particular writing skills related to the assignments from your Hume class. So in a way, you could think of it a bit as like a lab attached to your humanities class, but that it isn't a class unto itself. And so for that reason, because it only meets 2 or 3 times per quarter, and there isn't an additional set of assignments, nor do you receive a grade or credit for these seminars, that's why it's not constituting an actual class, and it's 0 units. It is, though, as you've noted, as we've talked about, spread over 2 quarters. So that's a major distinction between the maroon and the gray tracks as well. Those students on the maroon track will take ICA in either autumn winter, or spring. We have more sections in autumn and winter, but a good number in spring as well. And we do encourage students to talk with their academic advisors about when would be best for you to take the class. It's meant to be foundational. So, and this is regarding ICA in particular, that and so we have students complete it in their first year, but ideally as early as possible, since you'll have the chance to practice skills and focus on components of writing and thinking that will be relevant to all of your classes. We also in ICA have a visit with an academic librarian for each section. So the earlier that you can have that experience, the better in your college career. So that's a one quarter class. The humanities writing seminars do take place over 2 quarters of the Hume sequence. If you choose to take 3 quarters of the humanities core, which you're welcome to do, and many students do, I think it's a great option to consider. You would not take a 3rd quarter of writing seminars. It would only be the 2 quarters of HUMA 19100 writing seminars.
Thank you so much, Abby. Kathryn, I think this is a great question we get commonly in advising. Is there double counting between the core and individual majors?
So the short answer is no. There's not double counting between core and major classes or minor classes even. However, there can be core classes that prepare students for major classes down the road. So if a student is planning on being a chemistry major and they place into our general chemistry Chem 110, they could take that for the core physical science requirement and take that sequence in order to prepare them to take more major related advanced chemistry courses down the road. So we don't have double counting between core and major, but it can prepare you for your major field.
Thank you, Kathryn. Scott, a question from a transfer student, and we know that typically our majors in the physical science are quite rigorous, require typically a higher number of courses to complete the program requirements. So we have a transfer student who's curious about particularly if they don't have much prior physical science experience, the timeline of them kind of moving through those physical science or STEM, more broadly STEM science requirements. And I know you've worked with a number of transfer students yourself, and maybe can speak to the experience of some of our transfer students who may or may not be STEM-focused majors.
Yeah, so for any of you who are transfer students, what we will request is that you provide us with some transcripts and information for all of the courses you took at your previous institution if you're seeking credit for them. And so, for example, we do have cases where a class that you may have taken at a previous institution could count for our Phi-Sci core, for instance, if you're a non-science major. It could also just count for general education credit separate from that. And I would say for those of you who are going to be contemplating majors or minors within the physical sciences, what we strongly encourage, in addition to meeting with your academic advisor once that's assigned here, is to meet with our respective directors of undergraduate studies in those departments, because those will be the individuals who are evaluating the classes, say, specific in chemistry or physics you may have taken, if those are your intended majors, really to assess what was your previous level of preparation, how that compares to our own courses here, again, to kind of put you into the best place. So there is no reason why, if you were, say, entering as a sophomore and maybe you haven't taken general chemistry, et cetera, you can certainly catch up and be totally fine to complete the major. But I would recommend reaching out at a local level to the departments in addition to the advisors, just to really talk that through. And our individuals in those regards are very, very happy to speak with you and help you plan.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. I know we're running pretty tight on time here. So I just wanted to encourage anyone who hasn't had their question yet answered in the open chat. You will You are welcome to email our office as well for follow-up on any of those questions. And we also are going to be meeting with you. You're going to be assigned an academic advisor, as you'll see on the outline here on July 13th. You'll get a notification of who your advisor is, and then have an opportunity to meet with them one-on-one. As early as the 14th, but some advisors will be starting on the 20th with their individual meetings with you, and can go over the very specific situation plans, your goals for your time here at UChicago. And then I'd also like to encourage and emphasize our attendance at the Intro to Advising webinar kicking off on the 14th, and also our pre-registration webinar in August that you see here. And then we'll cover kind of all the details for you in terms of registering for your first set of courses. And I think Lincoln might still be on our presentation to wrap up here.
I am indeed still here. Thank you again to everybody who was here today presenting. I hope I gave everybody kind of a good look into the core and what you have ahead of you, or at least help you get some questions that you can ask your advisor later this summer. And a reminder again, this was recorded and will be available by the start of next week on our website. And like Steph had mentioned, if you have any questions about this and have any more follow-up, please email their office and they will help you out. And with that, thank you all again for joining, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day.